Well, hello, and welcome to Rally FC. That's right, Rally FC, the Ghostwriter podcast, the podcast that everybody was screaming for, because who doesn't want to talk about Ghostwriter? A PBS show from the 90s, but of course, I'm not going to be talking about it by myself. I am going to pull somebody else into this. So, everybody, welcome my guest, Rampy. Rampy, thank you for joining us today, sir.
Oh, Clay, what have you gotten me into?
I know, right? Actually, that was my first question for Adina last week, is I asked her, so, how much do you hate me for having you watch this show?
Which is funny, considering that Adina and I both, co-host a podcast about bad movies.
Yeah, it's true. Honestly, like, I pitched it the same way to everybody that I asked. I was like, unless you are, if you mind watching a cheesy show from the 90s, then that's fine. But if that doesn't bother you, and of course, yeah, when I talked to you, Jack, and Adina, when I was done, I was like thinking about the podcast that you three voluntarily do. I didn't feel so bad, but yeah. I will say, though, I felt especially bad for you on this one because I told Adina last week, this is actually the original pilot. Even though it was the second one that aired, this storyline, right. It was actually the pilot. And if I'm correct, I believe it was shot. I read something somewhere that said that one of the characters, Blaise Bardal, who plays Lenny, was 10 at the time. Now, when it came out in 92, she was born in 79, which means that she would have been 12 or 13 when it actually came out. And I'm like, if that's true, then they held on to this for like 3 years before it finally aired. And I will say the kids look much younger in this, but not 3 years younger. So I don't know if of course, I have no idea what the lag time was between when they shot the first season and when it actually aired. But there's definitely a bigger difference in how old they look in this episode to the first episode and then to the rest of the season. The rest of the season must have been shot around the same time. But yeah. So, I mean, not that I expect you to, but had you ever even heard of this show when I asked you about this?
I had actually heard of it.
Okay.
I had never seen it.
Sure.
But I had heard the name.
Okay.
And it's probably because I'm guessing this was around the same time as Wishbone.
Wishbone was, I think, mid to late 90s. I think it was like 95, 96. I mean, I could look it up.
Okay.
But this was definitely, like, it started in 92. I remember watching this, when I was like 12, 13. 10, 11, 12, around that age. But yeah, I remember thinking that Wishbone was much later, but I'm, for anybody, when you're a kid, time moves so slow. So you just, Wishbone was 95. So I think this ended in 90. Well, I think the last couple episodes aired in 95. So they kind of intersect.
Gotcha. But yeah, I figured it was probably around that same time period. Sure. So I'm just trying to think of why I would have heard of it.
Yeah, when I told Adina last episode that I was 10 when this came out, she kind of winced a little bit.
Well, when this came out, I would have been in high school, so... Okay. Adina's older.
Hey, you said it, not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like I told her last week, this was one of those shows that I made sure that I got the chance to watch. It came on Sunday mornings for me most of the time. I think there were a couple of times that it aired, on different days, like for, maybe the PBS telethon or something like that. They moved it. But for the most part, it was Sundays. But when I was a kid, I probably would have told you that I'd seen every episode. But when I watched this, I was like, I have never seen this episode. At least not in its entirety. Like, I've definitely, I think, maybe seen bits of it. Of course, a lot of it, if you pay attention to the opening credits take all of their stuff from this episode and the previous episode.
Okay.
So
yeah, I was wondering, but there were some shot as I was watching the series. I was like, oh wait, I don't remember seeing that in the opening credits.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is I think that the shots of the kids in the intro they actually shot in the second episode, so they look older than they look in this episode.
Oh man!
But that.
Oh, and also I figured it out. I figured out how I would have known this show.
Okay.
It was on at the same exact time period as Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Yes, because
which was one of my all-time favorite shows.
Love that. Well, and the guy who hosted that, Greg, I can't remember his last name right now, but the host of that was actually in a storyline of this show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, he played a wisecracking teacher who was not funny. Did. But yeah. But yeah, I loved that show. I would watch that every day after school, And,
yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that was another big thing for me. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's jump into this episode, which is called "Who Burned Mr. Brinker's Store?" Dun dun dun.
Yeah,
that's right.
A mystery that was easily solved in the first 10 minutes.
Oh, right. I will say, something that we talked about last week is that obviously a lot of this show is very contrived. Like, a lot of the things they do, you're like, why would they do that? Like, that makes no sense. It's like, they really just needed this plot point to happen, and so they forced this. And yeah, a lot of it's very contrived. But yeah, the mystery in this is super, like, not really hard to solve. But there are a lot of things in this show because, so the whole mystery is about a store owned by Mr. Brinker, played by Max Wright of Alf fame.
Willie!
Yes. Which I kind of, like, in my head have this as, like, so after the end of Alf, the Tanner family got down on their luck, so Willie opened up a store in New York and just became a horrible person, apparently.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking.
Because
it took me a few minutes to recognize him.
Oh, did
because it? Because when you first see him, he's talking to one of the kids, and like he's got this cap on, and he's kind of got his back turned to the camera. Sure. And I heard the voice. He's kind of doing a character voice, but it's still kind of his
just
voice.
A little bit. He's kind of putting on a little. Honestly, that sounds a little bit more like a Cosby impression. Not intentional, but he sounds like he is like trying to do like a bit of a New York accent, but it sounds very much like Max Wright.
It still sounds like him, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until the first...
I should not do that voice.
No, don't do that voice. But it wasn't until the first close-up on him that I really got a good look at him, and that's when I was like, it is him!
Sure. But, so the whole mystery is that his store gets burnt. It's very much a question as to how much of the store got burnt, because like when they first talk about it, they were like, somebody burned down Brinker's store. So you expect to like come around the corner and see this like husk of a building left. But
exactly.
The whole thing, everything is fine. Everything inside looks fine. We find out later it's just the back room that was burned out. Everything else is fine, seemingly. So, I mean, That's kind of a tip-off. It's like, oh, only the back room burnt. Wonder what Brinker had in the back room. But, I mean, we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a bit. But I will say, to set up this whole thing, he has an interaction with Jamal. And I will say it was a little confusing because his first interaction with Jamal was, like, very friendly. And he's like, oh, yeah, I knew you kids would like that. And, he seems like, the kid's friend. And then all of a sudden he gets served with a summons, which we later find out was from an FBI agent because he's, spoiler alert, he's copying copyrighted movies and selling them because he's the worst criminal ever. Yeah. I will say his whole setup is the worst crime enterprise I have ever heard of, because not only is he doing this, but he is selling these in a storefront. You don't sell hot merchandise in a storefront, number one. Number two, like, it's obvious because, like, if you look at all of his videos that he has for rent, they're all, like, in blank cassette covers. So it's like he didn't even try to camouflage the fact. And, like, for people that don't know what video stores used to look like, there were a lot of different ways that they used to look. Some of them had, like, the actual boxes of the movie out so that you could, grab it and take it up front. But then I remember there were some that, would have the box in front and the video behind, that was in, like, a blank, kind of nondescript case. But, the video itself looked legit. And, they mentioned several times that, these look blank. They don't have names on them, all this kind of stuff. And, like, I'm like, what? How did these kids know what these... I mean, I guess there were labels on the side, but I'm like... That just screams not legit video store.
Absolutely. I mean, even later in one of the later episodes, when one of the kids is trying to distract him, and grabs a bunch of videotapes off one of the shelves, and he starts ringing them up on the cash register as 731, 618. It's like,
okay, so.
That's not a movie.
I want to ask you about that because, I mean, this is like, that's, I think, like episode 3. It's way down the line, but I don't care. You brought it up.
Yeah, it's way down.
So, when he's doing that, there's one that he looks and he goes, 613, and he kind of like gives him a wink. I'm like, is he renting porn? I'm like, what is this?
I did get that impression. He says the number, and then it's not even to the kid. It's just sort of, oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, yeah.
Like, whoa,
yeah, I'm like, whoa, Willie, pull it back. Pull it way back. he didn't go to the curtained off section. That's not where he was. Besides, if it was, you shouldn't be renting it to him.
Exactly.
It's like, I know you have no morals, but my goodness. My God, man. But just to get further down the rabbit hole of what kind of person this character is. Okay, so he has like a disagreement with Jamal because, he's upset because he's been given this copyright notice, and, he has a couple interactions with a couple different kids, but he has kind of a blowout with Jamal where he's like, you kids don't buy anything, blah, 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 blah. And Jamal's like, well, some of these kids are your best customers, because Jamal's a dork. It's true. I'm just going to keep saying it because it's true. He's very well-meaning, but he is a dork. But they have this kind of disagreement, and Jamal storms off. He's like, you'll be sorry. And then, I mean, I'll go into what happens with Jamal later, but eventually, when we find out that his store has been burnt down, the next time that Brinker sees Jamal, he immediately is like, that's the kid, that's the one that threatened me, he burned down my store. I'm like, okay. I mean, if it's not obvious, we eventually learn that Brinker burned his own store.
Right.
But at no point does the police detective ever say, we got to find out who did this, otherwise it's your head, or, he is not suspected at all. He's got his own faulty alibi. He is just dead set at getting a 10-year-old convicted of arson.
Oh, yeah.
What piece of shit are you? It's like, my goodness, because, when I read the description of this, it's like, we eventually find out that Brinker burned down his store to cover up a much more serious crime. And I'm like, okay, copyright infringement, arson, those are not his most serious crimes. His most serious crime is trying to convict a 10-year-old of arson for no good reason. Like, he doesn't even have a reason to try to get Jamal convicted except to create conflict in the episode.
Right. Yeah. That's it. Which goes back to the whole thing. Everything is just so contrived.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a kid show. If I had watched this as a child, I wouldn't have been thinking, well, that makes no sense. They just made this up. I'm 10. I'm like, oh no, Jamal can't go to jail. Ooh.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that really the only reason that Jamal he's chosen to be the scapegoat, that the pressure, or that the cop turns his attention to Jamal, it's all to create the urgency needed in order to get the kids to solve the case before Jamal gets dragged to jail.
Yeah, which, I mean, number one. No, never. I mean, he may have been, the worst that would have happened is juvenile court, juveniles, but
right.
Even then, like, I don't think it would have been, obviously they're upping it to create, like we said, conflict in the episode. They're trying to make it seem more dangerous than it ever really could be. But because Brinker is the source of that, it makes him seem like the worst person in the world.
It really does.
And the dumbest criminal. So Brinker does not have a lot going for him. But I will say, okay, so we talked about Brinker, but when Jamal leaves and, he's very angry. So he decides he's going to sit down and he's going to tell Brinker what he thinks of it. And he starts writing it. And of course, this is all just further proof that Jamal is a dork. Because the first things that he writes down are, Brinker, you stinker. And you're a nasty old geek. I'm like, okay, what 40-year-old man wrote that thinking that the 10-year-old would make that sentence up?
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. And then, like, he writes, like, a whole thing on this, and I just want to read, because it's just so ridiculous. But he writes a lot. He does write a little bit like a kid, because it's all just fragmented thoughts. He's like, you're mean. Your breath stinks. I don't know. You're selfish. You treat your customers horrible. You make me so mad. You can't treat us this way. You have no right. We'll boycott. You better watch out. Yuck, yuck. First of all, yuck, yuck.
Yuck, yuck.
Where did that come from? I don't know what came over him. Yeah,
you just had to get out.
In what time period is that a way to end a nasty message? Because it wasn't the 90s. I can tell you that.
Nope.
Oh. And the way that he throws around boycott, I'm like, do you know what that means, Jamal? I'm not sure you know what that word means. I mean, he's actually using it correctly. I'm just not sure that he actually knows what it means. But yeah, I will say though that in this scene, Ghostwriter corrects all of Twitter because because he tells Jamal, he's like, go ahead, write what you want to write. Just get it out. And then when Jamal's written all of it, Ghostwriter immediately deletes it all and says, feel better? And Jamal's like, yes. And then he writes an equally cheesy, but much nicer message. And I'm like, see, in 1992, Ghostwriter taught us all how we should tweet. You write down the horrible thing, then you delete it when you're calm, and then you rewrite it, and then that's what you tweet.
Exactly.
Twitter could really learn a lot from Ghostwriter. I'm just saying. But yeah, so he writes this message and then decides to go. Well, initially he decides to go to the library, which he finds out is closed. Which I'm wondering, I'm like, okay, is that a new thing? Did you really just not know that the library is closed at 8 o'clock at night in New York? First of all, he's walking around at night in New York City at 10 years old.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, his grandmother even mentions that. It's like, well, make sure to get home before 7 because I don't want you out there by yourself.
Yeah.
Like, these kids are running around the entirety of New York City.
Yeah, by themselves.
At all hours of the day without any adult
very little supervision, if any. Yeah. Yeah, no.
Which, back in the day, true.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean... That's how it was in my small town where I grew up. But even in the bigger town, even especially New York City.
Yeah.
During the daytime, yes, as long as you're in groups.
Right. But alone at night,
where these kids are just by themselves doing whatever.
Yeah.
And then definitely at night. Yeah, that one was just...
Yeah, I don't know. But he decides to swing by Brinker's store and leave the letter in the mail slot, which I'm like, you could have taken it to him tomorrow. You didn't need to make a special trip to drop off this letter because that's what gets him in all of this trouble, of course. Is while he's there, he slips the letter in the mail slot. He rips his jacket on a nail that's in the mail slot because... Brinker is a horrible human being and, leaves nails in his mail slot. And he gets caught on tape and, it's fuzzy, so nobody knows it's him, but everybody is looking for the person who we see outside, the person in the video. It's the kid in the video. He's the one that burnt the store. Which is what...
And also... some random kid on a bike comes up behind him and lights some firecrackers and throws them behind Jamal.
Yes.
Which also gets caught on the camera.
Which is never resolved.
No. I understand the implication is that this kid who has been seen on camera trying to put something into the store also has firecrackers go off behind him. Therefore, this kid tried to blow up the store.
Right. I think they think that the firecracker kid and the kid in the video are the one and the same. But yeah,
exactly.
The thing is that once Jamal finally because, it becomes a big thing about how lying is bad and all this kind of stuff because since Jamal is afraid that they're going to take him to jail, he keeps telling the police, he never says that wasn't me in the video. What he always says is, I didn't burn down the store.
Exactly.
So he never actually lies, but he doesn't cop to actually being there. So it makes it difficult.
By omission.
Right, exactly. But when he's telling even his group that, even the Ghostwriter team doesn't know that he was there. And when it eventually comes out, he finally tells them, but there was a delivery guy there and a kid on a bike with firecrackers. Well, they eventually track down the delivery guy. They never track down the firecracker kid.
No,
they chase him a couple of times.
Occasions.
Yeah,
two separate occasions where Jamal sees him and tries to chase him, but then loses him.
Yeah.
And then later on, Jamal and one of the other kids see him and they try to corner him, and then they miss him again.
And they lose him.
And that's it.
Yeah, then they just drop that thread.
Never hear about him again.
No, and I mean, obviously they solved the case. They didn't end up needing to, but that just seems really sloppy to me, to bring out this thread and then never resolve it at all.
No.
They never even, when they figure it out, are like, oh, so the firecracker kid had nothing to do with it. It's like he never existed. Because he really didn't need to.
Never part of the equation for the rest of the time. So why even have him in there in the first place? Like, I understand having the fireworks go off behind Jamal to make it look like he deals in explosives or whatever. Sure. You know, it's driving the story. They never bring him into the story in a meaningful way. We never even see the kid. Well,
and I mean, at least, quickly resolve it.
Filler. It just feels like filler.
Oh, it 100% is. I feel like it was one of those things that they meant to come back to, but for one reason or another, they didn't. And then it's almost like they forgot about it.
That is kind of how it feels. I mean, it sort of serves its purpose since it's a mystery. There's a chase scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's another. The kid's another red herring, but you need to debunk red herrings. I mean, it could have been a really quick. Oh, I know that kid. He's just blah blah blah. It could have been. You didn't even need to meet him. It could have just been a quick explanation. Something. But no, they never get back to it, and I just remember thinking, well, that's just really sloppy. I mean, not to say that this show is super tough or anything.
Specifically, especially since they took their time plotting out how they were going to solve the mystery.
Right.
So distinctly, it's like, this group is going to go talk to this guy. They find out this information, which leads to this guy, which leads them to this. And then they find out, okay, we've eliminated this person as a suspect because of this evidence. Right. Now, moving on. That part of it is well done.
Sure.
And I can see that, that was interesting to see how they would do that and explain it on a level of, like, for elementary kids,
which is definitely the demographic,
But to have that loose thread just dangling in the wind and then to leave it there, it's just puzzling. It's just puzzling.
Yeah. Speaking of loose threads,
yes,
I want to talk about the character of Craig, because this guy, first of all, he is played by Jeremy Miller, who you might remember from Growing Pains. He was the little kid on Growing Pains that eventually who eventually got usurped by Leonardo DiCaprio. Because he was younger and cuter at the time.
Right.
But he played the youngest son on Growing Pains, and I don't think he really did a whole lot after that. This is definitely towards the end of Growing Pains, because he's definitely, in that older phase. But he's introduced as Craig, and here's the thing. They add him to the team at the end. This is the only episode we ever see Craig in.
Really?
Yeah. I feel like they probably did it because, most of these kids, like, the most they had ever done was, like, guest spots on, shows and on sitcoms and stuff here and there, and maybe commercials. But I'm thinking that maybe they brought him in for cred. I will say, though, they didn't bring him in to boost up the cast, because he's definitely doesn't have the best performance. It's okay.
Oh, no.
But I will say, I wrote in my notes, like, my idea of Craig's character is that he's just very white. I swear, you could take every single one of his lines, take them out, and just replace it with the phrase over and over again, "It's all right, I'm very white." And it would work the same as all the rest of his lines, because everything that he does, so his whole storyline is, at the beginning when we first meet him, he just really wants to play basketball, and all of the other kids playing basketball are, people of color, black kids, Latinx kids. He's the one white kid, and he's just like, come on, guys, let me play. I'm really good. I'm just like, it's all right, guys. I'm very white. I swear, that's all he needed to say, and it still would have gotten across. But he's just and then once they resolve that storyline, because eventually he plays a very bad game of basketball. I'm sorry. At no point could I ever believe that he could have beaten that other kid. Like, because when they showed the other kid, like, dominating in the moments he was dominating, he looked good.
Right.
I was like, that kid plays basketball. When they showed Craig playing basketball once again, it's all right, guys. I'm very white. Like, what in the world? It was so bad. Like, honestly, it looked like me playing basketball. And I am a horrible basketball player. In no way. I mean, and I will give them this. They didn't say that he beat the kid, Momo, whatever his name was.
Yeah, that's Momo,
They had it, but they had it way too close. It's
close.
Like,
yeah,
no,
they were playing 21.
Yes.
And the final score, like Momo was 21, but Craig was 19.
Yeah, no way. Momo would have gotten 21, and Craig maybe would have gotten 3 because he slipped on a banana peel and threw the basket just in the right way. Because he's very white. He just has that luck. But my goodness. It was really not good. But yeah, once they resolve that, then they keep bringing him in, and it was almost like after that, Craig became the Deus Ex Machina of the episode, when they were like, we need to know what copyright infringement is. Oh, well, that kid Craig knows videos. He does? Why?
And the only reason that Jamal knows that is because at the courtside, there was an electronics magazine that belonged to Craig. And Jamal's like, you know electronics? And he's like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
That's it. No, that's the only discussion about it they ever had.
Yeah. That and the scene where Craig tries to lawyer the police detective. Because he's like, do you have a warrant? Do you have this? That's just circumstantial evidence. I'm like, you've been watching a lot of Law and Order, haven't you, Craig? Yes, I have. Exactly. I'm very white.
He's very white.
Yes. Oh, but yeah, honestly, at the end, like, I was like, when they made him a member, I'm like, you really could have cut this out. Nobody needed Craig to be on that team. It really could have cut together real easy. Because, I'm just like, I wasn't a fan.
Well, and also, like, he's the second person to join the team in the episode. Right,
which, okay, so Tina was actually introduced in the last episode. Now, obviously, she was already on the team, even though, because this one was filmed first, but in the last one, she was just introduced. A little confusing. But yeah, honestly, the majority of the scenes in the intro with Tina, the whole explanation of what Ghostwriter is comes from her induction scene in this episode. And, honestly, it's pretty good because it explains all of the ins and outs of, what Ghostwriter is, the fact that he can only read words, he can't see you, he can't hear you, all that kind of good stuff.
Right, but it doesn't come in until almost halfway through the episode.
Which is one of the reasons why they shot another pilot.
So confused.
Yeah.
Because that's when you told me this was originally the pilot episode, and as I was watching, I'm like, who are these people? Yeah. Why are they just acting like letters suddenly come off the page and start swirling around in front of them, and they're just like, Ghostwriter!
Yeah. Yeah, what did you think? Because I think the first scene we see Ghostwriter. Oh no! It's in Brinker's store when he shows him the copyright infringement. What was your thoughts?
On the computer screen.
Yeah, on the computer screen.
Yeah, which, can I just say, anytime Ghostwriter was writing and they used some kind of video graphics to impose them on the screen, it looked way better than any time they actually used the computer to type out the words.
Sure.
Oh my
God.
I
will say that the typeface, however they did the computer in this episode, they changed it for the whole rest of the series because it looks weird. It looks very imposed on that screen. It doesn't look like it belongs on that computer screen.
Right.
Whereas
and there was also the delay between hearing the loud tapping on the keyboard, which I know those old keyboards did sound like that, but it's like a horse hoof is just banging on. But then you would hear like tap, 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 and it would pan up to the screen, and he would only be 3 letters in, to what he was typing. It was like, oh, computers were bad back then, but they worked better than this guy. Come on.
Well, hey, at least we don't get all of those like early internet modem sounds. At least not yet.
Well, yeah, that's true.
But I mean, I will say I think they definitely improved that visual for the better later on. I mean, I will say I kind of got a kick out of this clip because in this moment it almost seems like the team feels the same way I do about Craig. So I want to play this for you real quick.
Guys, I think it's time we rally.
I hear you.
Absolutely. Cool. What's a rally?
Sorry, Craig. That's kind of a secret between me and my friends.
I'm like, Craig just insinuates himself because if you look at that scene, Craig's just like standing off to the side and they're like, guys, let's rally. And he's like, yeah, let's rally. It's like, nobody invited you, Craig. You're not in this club.
Yeah,
go away.
Exactly.
You're not in this club, Craig. Jeez. I know you're very white, but my goodness, we've already met our quota. We're good.
And he takes it that way, too. He's just like, oh,
all right.
Slowly walks away.
Call me if you need somebody very white. We will, Craig. We will. Don't call us. We'll call you. Okay. So, yeah, like one of the big things in this episode, Ghostwriter keeps telling them copyright infringement. And, obviously, Ghostwriter often will ask questions to make the kids think because, it's all about, all PBS shows had like a certain thing they were trying to teach, whether it was math or geography or whatever. This is obviously like reading, writing, and critical thinking.
Right.
And so he would often ask things like, what's copyright infringement? And of course, they're kids. They don't know. So they go to the library. And first of all, they get all of these books. Like so many books. And they're like, we need to get all these books to find out what copyright infringement is. And then they just look it all up in the dictionary. I'm like, you didn't need all these books, guys. You just needed the dictionary.
Look it up separately. Yeah. One looks up copyright. Yeah. The other looks up infringement.
You just needed one book for that job, guys.
Copyright infringement.
Yes. I mean, I will say
and also, what 12-year-old kid doesn't know that the FBI is headquartered in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
Who does not know that?
Well, and the FBI, like, for them to be like, the FBI? What's that? I'm like, that's a stretch, guys. That is a stretch.
No, seriously. And that's what confused me. Because I went back and looked again, and Ghostwriter is the one who doesn't know what FBI is.
Right, and that makes sense.
The kids are familiar with the term, but they still kind of act like they're not sure what
it is.
It actually means. And then they put together that the guy where the FBI came from, his business card in the first place, must be involved with the FBI, like an agent. And then it's like,
Zip, I'm sorry, you
FBI
cut out for a second there.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. But the, shit, what was the thing?
Yeah, sorry. I know.
Okay.
Got you right in the middle of a thought.
Yeah. But they know that the guy who had the FBI on his business card must be an agent of the FBI. Mm-hmm. And then they have to go to the library while they're looking up copyright and then infringement.
Right.
Find out that the FBI headquarters is in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Because the guy, they investigated him earlier and found out that the cab driver took him after he visited the store in the first place.
Right.
Took him to the airport because he had a 6:30 flight back to Washington, D.C.
Okay.
That's how they put this whole thing together, and we get the entire arc of the FBI agent.
Yeah. I want to talk
for like 2 minutes in the first episode.
Yeah, I know. I want to talk about the cab driver because, first of all, he's played by Lou Albano, basically playing himself because his whole thing is, am I going to be on TV? This is going to get me on TV, right? Put me on TV. I'm like, I'm not really sure that Lou Albano was actually cast. I'm almost certain that he was actually just a cab driver that day, and it was like, oh, Lou Albano was here, be in our show for a second. But what I love about his bit is they're like, what about the man that you were driving yesterday? And he's like, I have so many fares. There's no way I could remember. And then they're like, the guy you took to Brinker store who's like, oh yeah, that guy. He told me he had an 11 or a 7:30 flight and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, suddenly you have a photographic memory. It goes from, there's no way I could remember. And then you know everything about this man.
After looking at his sheet with all of his fares where he picks up and drops off, which is like a list of 50 different people.
Yes.
Picks one off the sheet. Oh, yeah, that guy. He did this and this and this.
Yeah,
and this.
Gave you his life story. He was born in Missouri. Very nice. His family raises cows. It's like he could have just given us a whole backstory. Honestly, I would have been there for that. Just Lou Albano tells us this man's whole life story.
Yep. That was the whole thing. Just standing there telling the story for 30 minutes. I'm in.
It was great. I do want to mention though, in the library, after they, in one book, find out what copyright infringement is. They decide to keep looking up things in the other books that they got for no reason. And they decide to basically do an ad for the library.
Oh, these books are neat. I gotta check these out.
But yeah, they just do an ad for the library. I'm like, these books are neat. I'm like, first of all, early 90s, I don't know a single kid that would have said, these books are neat. Gee, mister. It's just like, so.
And that's the wonderment of children's programming on the public broadcasting.
Oh, yes. The wonder of PBS children's programming.
This is peak children's acting on a children's program for PBS.
Yeah.
They have them saying ridiculous things, and they say them in ridiculous ways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I will say, though, I love that. These books are neat.
Look, they're neat.
Oh, jeez.
Join your local library, kids.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. But yeah, I'm just like, okay, now we're doing an ad for the library. Very nice. But yeah, let's just talk about some of the other people that we encounter in this, because we're actually introduced in this episode to Lieutenant McQuaid, played by Mike Hodge, who in This episode introduces himself as part of the arson division, but then he's basically just the standard cop character from then on. Mm-hmm. That they just, anytime that they've solved a case, they're like, well, let's call Lieutenant McQuaid. I think he only appears a few more times, but they mention him all the time.
Gotcha. So he's like the default actual police detective that they bring all their findings to.
Exactly. In the last episode, this was Lieutenant McQuaid had already been created, but it was before we met him, so we couldn't bring him in. So in the last episode, they had can't remember the man's name, Larry from Perfect Strangers, Mark Lynn-Baker. Yeah, I mean, which he was great as a really earnest cop who was really excited to get these kids' quarters back, but didn't have the same gravitas as Lieutenant McQuaid.
No.
I mean, and, I think, when you talk about the adult actors in this show, it's always interesting to watch adult actors in a kid's show because, like, with a lot of them, you're like, you can tell that there's really something there, but they're only being able to stretch as far as the material will allow. Case in point, in these first two stories, Jamal's dad is played by Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes, he is!
Yeah, and I will say, he's not given a whole lot, but I really like him as Jamal's dad. He's likable. Yeah, he's believable. I mean, you understand, like, I think that their chemistry's really good. He interacts with him well. I think he did really well in this.
He did, yeah. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, and let's see. There is one adult listed in the entire regular cast of this show. Marcella Lowry, who plays Cece Jenkins, Jamal's grandmother. She's the only actual adult member of the regular cast. She is the only one in the intro. And I will say she is one of 2, maybe 3 adult cast members that are never replaced.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I do believe that she's there a little bit more often because they kind of often default, even if the team isn't always at Jamal's house, there are often other storylines happening at Jamal's house. So she's in a lot of episodes. But I always liked her. I remember seeing her, as a kid in different sitcoms and stuff. And I think, was she the Pine Sol lady or was that a different woman?
I think that's a different woman.
Yeah. Oh, no, she did Campbell Soup commercials for a little while.
There you go.
But yeah, there are a few others, but we didn't get a whole lot of adults in this episode. To the point where Lenny's dad apparently has not been cast yet, because we are often at Lenny's house, but she appears to live alone.
I've noticed that. She has this giant room with like 15 different musical instruments, and not like toy instruments either. She's got like 2 electric guitars.
Yeah, and it
standing
is
up next to her room. She's got a huge keyboard / synthesizer / beatbox machine. It's like she's got a huge rig set up, and I never saw a single trace of a parent anywhere in her life.
It is established in the earlier episode that her dad is a musician. But it almost looks like they were like, oh, no. She's just, a really good musical artist. She's 10. She lives on her own. And then they decided, let's walk that back. Let's not have a 10-year-old live on her own. Okay, let's say those instruments belong to someone else. All right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, because all of their meetings, all of their rallies take place at Lenny's house. But yeah, her parents, we established later on, it's just her and her dad. Her mom is deceased. But, we never see her dad in this episode. And yeah, it really does just look like, she's just living the bohemian lifestyle all on her own.
Right.
which this was another one of those reasons that I was like, oh, I'm sorry, Zip. Because we get songwriting sessions with Lenny.
Oh my God.
And they're long, too. They are not short.
That was probably the most insufferable part of this entire episode. Was sitting there listening and watching this 10, 11-year-old girl, whatever, try to write a hip-hop song about how cool friends are.
Well,
and it's not just, hey, I've already written this song and I'm going to perform it for you now. It's I'm playing the music.
We're in the writing process.
And now I'm spitting out some lyrics. No, that doesn't work. I'm going to spit out some more lyrics. That sounds good. Yeah. Now I have to write the entire lyric down for 5 freaking minutes.
Yes. Yeah, that's something we established in the last episode. Because this show is about reading and writing, it's not like regular shows where, we just hint at them writing things down. We actually have to watch it.
Exactly.
Which, okay. I mean, I will say at times they at least
type stuff on the computer for 15 minutes.
Right. I will say at least there are some scenes where they time lapse so that we don't see the entire process. But yeah.
But not often.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not a regular feature. But yeah, I mean, and she's 10, she's fine. But yeah, I will say,
hey, she's got serious rap skills.
Yeah,
I mean, to be that young and to spit fire like that, I mean, it was really good.
There is something about the way that she delivers the lyrics. I like the attitude that she uses to portray this. It's just, once again, a lot of times we get, 30, 40-year-olds writing what they think kids would say as, what kids would think is cool, and they're not on top of it. I will say my biggest laugh line in that whole thing is she's writing this whole thing, friends are forever, and friends, I love friends. And she writes something down and she's like, no, too corny. I was like, that was too corny? That was too corny. But the whole other thing about
make you sad. That's the corny part,
yes.
Really?
Yes, that was the one. Oh, jeez. But yeah, I will say during this, the one other thing I do want to talk about with Lenny is that Jamal's letter. First of all, the lieutenant gets down to remove a thread from the mailbox, but he doesn't see the letter in the middle of the floor. It's like, these are not.
It's in the very middle. There is nothing else around it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's in a box with a couple of other things, but still, it's like, you guys are detectives. You're supposed to be looking at everything. Lenny just walks up and grabs the letter out and walks away with it. And
this is after he just said, hey, this is a crime scene. Yes! Don't touch anything. But yet the crime scene tape only blocks off the back room, not the entire store.
Yeah.
There's 15 people walking around in the main part of the store and nobody cares.
No.
That's
and
where all the evidence is.
Yes. So Lenny removes evidence. And then when she finds out it's evidence, she's like, oh man, this is evidence. I shouldn't have this, should I? I'm like, no, Lenny, you should never have taken it out of the store. That's illegal.
But it's the law.
I will say, though, there was a moment after... Okay, so Lenny's the first one to find out that Jamal was there because she finds the letter, and they make a big deal later on about how the letter is so nice that it actually clears Jamal, all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But, Lenny just knows that she hasn't... I don't think she really cares that much about the contents. She just knows that it's a letter from Jamal. It was there when he said he wasn't. So she gets freaked out and, she lets Jamal know that she knows, but, he's just like, I don't know what to do. So she gives it to Jamal's grandmother. And that's when we finally get all of this out in the open. I will say, though, that Grandma is like, okay, now you did this. We're going to wait until Monday, 2 days from now, and then you and your parents are going to go down to the police and clear this all up. I'm like, why are we waiting, Grandma? Why can you not just take this down to the police and get it cleared up? Why do we have to wait for Mom and Dad? It's like, exactly. Is the house not allowed to be empty? I don't know what the deal is here. But I will say that Lenny gives me one of my favorite moments in this episode. So I gotta play this clip.
Lenny, I'm sorry I lied to you. It was stupid.
You're right. It was. See you around.
Lenny does not hold back. She's just like, yep, it was real done. All right.
Yep.
See you later. It's just,
all right.
And then Grandma follows it up.
Well, don't look at me. She's right.
But yeah, I was just like, yeah, Lenny and Grandma do not hold back.
Nope.
I think the only people we haven't talked about in this, we haven't really talked about Alex. Alex doesn't do that much in this episode. He's more just kind of running errands for everybody else. But we do formally get Tina as a member in this episode. Right. And then Alex's sister, Gabby. What did you think about these two characters?
I like Tina. Tina is very much no nonsense.
Sure.
And then Gabby is the complete opposite, which is she's the funny best friend type character where she's there for a quick, punchline or she's just always trying to be funny and goofing around, and like she's always trying to be the reporter in Tina's video, and Tina's like, "Would you get out of my shot?"
Right.
I don't want you in it.
Yeah, I will say.
And I think,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think the balance actually works well for that relationship
between the two.
Between the two of them. However, just on the on the real here, Gabby just annoyed the heck out of me.
Did she? Oh, wow. Because, I will say, this is... Go ahead.
Because she did come across as that one-note character. Like, I'm just here to make funny lines. And that's about all she did, Sure. Except for be one of the people who had to take 5 minutes to write down every single word they just said during the investigation phase. And that's why I didn't mind those scenes too much, because Tina and Gabby really do they took on the bulk of the investigative portion of the storyline.
Yeah.
And I was actually interested in following that, because I'm like, this is really neat the way that this has been scripted to unfold how you solve a case by coming up, using the scientific method, basically.
Sure.
You come up with your hypothesis. Here are your suspects.
Yeah.
And then you test your hypothesis with your evidence, and then you can eliminate, from there and come down to the ultimate truth. And I thought they did a great job. That's one of the things I really liked about this show, is that they did such a good job of explaining the entire process to their intended audience, you know?
Yeah, they do that actually a couple of times with Tina, because they also, before the mystery is even set up, they use Tina to explain what a shot list is. Because Tina, when we first see her and Gabby, Tina is shooting a video about what kids like to do after school, and Tina is... making a list of all the shots. And they do actually, I think, a pretty good explanation for children of what goes into that type of, making videos, making, stories, that kind of thing. So I really like the way the kind of character development that they kind of give her. I will say, though, maybe it's because it is a holdover from the last episode. Gabby's my favorite because, to me, she is the most naturalistic. Like, she is, in my opinion, the least, kid actory. Like, she comes off like she's just really being herself. I mean, granted, she probably doesn't have to stretch that much because it's probably not that far off from her actual, she's just playing an annoying little sister. Well,
right.
For all we know, that's exactly what she was. But I always get a kick out of Gabby. But, I mean, I can understand, especially if this is the first one, how she could come off as annoying to you.
Right. Well, and part of that was also, it's not really established who Gabby is until we meet Alex.
Yeah, sure.
And then it's like, hey, she's bugging me. Well, she's my little sister, but and I'm like, oh, okay. So Gabby has an older brother named Alex.
Yeah.
Who's Alex?
Yeah, that's really not
out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think honestly, Alex probably got the greatest disservice in this episode because he's really just a clinger on. He just kind of is around. Yeah. Nobody really knows what he's there for. He just does what people tell him to do. I mean, it was obviously a good call that they decided to go back and shoot an actual pilot. Because this really didn't explain very well what Ghostwriter was until, like we said, because they explained it in the episode that Tina was inducted, but that wasn't until like episode 3. So the whole time you're just seeing this glowing ball, with quotations on its head, bouncing around, writing down words, and you're like, "What is this thing? What's going on?" I mean,
and then when he appears to the kids, they're just like, "Oh, hey, Ghostwriter."
Yeah.
Oh, here's that. What are you trying to tell me this time?
Sure.
It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
We, the audience, have no idea what's happening right now.
No, I mean, obviously, this wouldn't be the first pilot to just drop you in the middle of an odd world, but this, especially for a kids show, it needs a bit more explanation. And also, obviously, these characters needed more explanation because we didn't know who any of them were. I mean, granted, this was not the very first episode I ever saw. I saw the first one, or I had seen other ones, and I felt it was easier to grab onto. So I don't know exactly how that would have felt for you, but apparently it was a little confusing for a while.
It was. I mean, now they do have, in the opening credits, they do have, you hear the explanation of Ghostwriter just showed up one day and he can read things and that's how we communicate. I was like, so I understood that part, but not knowing who any of the characters were right off the bat is what added to the confusion. I mean, it all works itself out.
Right.
Because they do explain it as they go. It's weird that it takes so long to get there.
Yeah.
Now, that does bring up another question. So, this one story arc...
Yes.
It's one continuous story, but I watched it in broken up into 4 parts.
4 episodes. Yes.
Is that how it was originally presented?
Yes. It was presented in a serialized format. Most of the story arcs are 4 episodes. There are 2 in the entire series that are 5, but most of them are 4.
Okay.
I will say that they did apparently put, I think, like 3 or 4 stories from season 1 on like video, and those were presented basically as 2-hour movies.
Right. Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, honestly, if you just take out all the, hey kids, here's what happened last time on Ghostwriter.
Right.
Pull out your clue books, which makes it sound like Blue's Clues for some reason.
Sure.
If you just took those parts out and pushed them all together, it would be an 1.5 hour long movie.
I mean, I will say, obviously, the serialized format is from a much more, from an older age. Serials were a big thing for a while. But, there's also the idea of this is for kids. A half-hour program is probably an easier sell than a, 1.5 to 2 hour movie once a week. you know.
Sure.
So, and I mean, you know, I remember when I was a kid, I believe the way they did it, I might be wrong, but I believe it was like an hour block, so that if you missed last week, they played the episode from last week first. But if you'd already seen that, you could, you know, refresh your memory or something. But if you hadn't, you could catch up and then watch the next episode.
Gotcha.
So I do think it was presented in an hour block, but it wasn't like, you know, kids are going to have to sit down necessarily for an entire hour. Now, I was an odd kid. I had no problem sitting for an hour, 2 hours to watch a movie. You know, that to me was fun. But yeah,
it was interesting because you normally don't see TV shows, especially in the U.S., presented in this way.
No.
So you might have, you know, like 12 episodes in a season.
Sure.
But then that is technically divided up into 3 separate storylines.
Yeah.
You know, that do not happen concurrently.
Right.
So it's, you know, usually only see something like this in like a BBC miniseries or something like that.
But you do have to remember this is PBS, which actually runs a lot more similar to the BBC than you know, most American channels.
Well, true, because for a while they were the only ones who showed BBC programming in America.
yeah. But they're also both publicly funded.
Right. No, it makes sense. It was just interesting because as I was watching it, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, you know, you could just squish this whole thing and make a movie.
Yeah, and I mean, they did at times, but yeah.
But anyway,
sure.
I digress.
All right. Well, is there anything else about the episode that you wanted to talk about?
I think we pretty much covered it. I think really I just like the biggest gap in logic to me in the story was just how the detective was dead set on whoever the person was at the door that we see in the security camera. Yeah. Obviously the person who set the fire.
Yeah, and said that on Tina's video too.
Room on the opposite side of the building from the front door. How did the person who you only saw at the front door, who appeared and then disappeared, could they possibly be the one who set the fire in the back room?
If anything, he should have just said they're wanted for questioning because they were there, you know, when the fire was set. I mean, we didn't really say, but, you know, eventually we discover that, you know, Brinker actually what he did, because he had an alibi for 7 o'clock because he was speaking to a parents group or something like that. But he actually said it at 8 o'clock and just set the clock back. But he didn't do that to his neighbor's clock, and his neighbor's clock also got damaged, and it was frozen at 8. Oh. Yeah. But yeah.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there definitely wasn't a whole lot of logic. I mean, in this, I mean, the whole fact that, I mean, there were a couple of times where you don't want to reveal who your suspect is in an investigation to a large group of people. Number one, because if you're actually talking about who they are, that could be harmful to them if they're not actually the person. But number two, if they are the person, you've just tipped them off.
Exactly.
Yeah. If anything, they're a person of interest. That's why these buzzwords are used. But yeah, I will say, just to further prove that Brinker was the worst criminal in the world, much less a horrible person. He was a horrible criminal because he went through all of the painstaking task of burning his back room to get rid of the evidence, and then left the burnt out VCRs on his shelf.
Yeah. Set the fire.
An idiot like Craig could figure out what he was doing.
Exactly.
Go away, Craig.
Yeah. Burn the evidence, but then don't remove what's left.
Leave it there. Leave it there.
Leave it all.
Absolutely.
And just stick a piece of wood in front of it. So
and continue to sell your blank tapes with movies on them.
With pirated movies.
Such a bad criminal. All right.
And also, I found it very hilarious that at the end of this entire episode, if you sit through all of the end credits, it then brings up the screen that says,
the copyright thing.
To copy, it is illegal to make copies of this material.
Well, and what's funny is I think that's the only episode that is on. At least on the YouTube recordings that I've seen. I don't know. I don't know if they copied it off of a video version of it, and maybe that's where they got it, or if somebody just added that on as a joke. I don't know, but yeah, that as far as I can remember,
because it is the very last thing. Because it go through the entire credits of the show, and then it goes through the regular PBS stuff of this brought to you by the Ginny and Steve Foundation and viewers like you, and all that stuff is over. Yeah, and then it brings up that last title card.
Yep.
Of that, this is copyrighted material. I'm like, somebody had to just throw that on there just because they got a kick out of it.
Oh yeah, I will say though that is funny. I noticed that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else?
No, just that. Because they bring Tina into the team, and then they brought Craig into the team for apparently no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, well, and it's totally like it's one of the very last things. They totally could have cut that out when they realized that they weren't going to keep him on.
They weren't going to keep him, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, within this one story arc, we have two people who get added to the team.
Yeah.
I said, at this rate, by the end of season 2, the entire school is going to be on the team.
It does seem like that. I will say the first few episodes, they seem to just keep adding members. It does eventually stop, but you're just like, how many people are going to be on this team?
Yeah, it's like for
everyone but Craig.
Well, yeah.
I literally wrote in my notes, I was like, oh, Craig's on the... no, never mind.
Never to be seen again.
All right. Well, let's real quick go ahead and get into a couple segments here. Let's talk, Zip. Who was your top suspect? The character that was either your favorite or that you thought was the best part of the episode, or whatever criteria you want to use. The one you hated the least.
No, I mean, I didn't hate everybody, and it harkens back to what I said. This is peak children's acting. It is what it is, and I'm not going to fault them for that because they're doing the best they can, and that's cool. Hey, I didn't have a TV show on PBS when I was 11, so
no.
Up theirs. Anyway, no, my favorite character, I think, in the episode had to be Grandma.
Sure.
Yeah, she brought that presence that I was lacking from spending so much time with these kids running around the city with no supervision whatsoever. Right. She's really grounded.
Yeah.
And she was the most naturalistic actor in the entire show.
Sure.
There were lots of times where I felt like, yep, it's that Mystery Science Theater thing of acting,
Yeah.
For several of those moments, like I felt really bad for Detective McQuaid because when the girls were filming him for his interview, he just had a long rambling monologue that he just had to get through, and that's exactly how it felt. He stumbled over several words, and they were just like, "Look, that's the best take. Let's just keep it. Move on." And I'm like, no, go back and film it again.
He could do that better. I know he can
do it better, guys. Come on. I know you only have like 2 tapes because you're running out of not blank VHS tapes that are $3 each.
Yeah. I was like, that's expensive.
Seriously. And they weren't even blank.
No.
And that's what got me is like, I'll sell you a blank VHS for $3, but yet he rents them out for $2.50 a night.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Talk about a scam. Anyway, but Grandma was like the complete antithesis of all of the other adults. She was so warm and inviting and gentle, and she really felt like a grandmother, should be. Yeah,
Sure.
I really enjoyed her performance, and seeing that she was wearing a postal outfit in the credits.
Yes. She is.
And I think the scene where Samuel L. Jackson's character was introduced, she was sitting in the corner. She was wearing the outfit.
Yeah.
We never actually saw her on the job.
Yeah, there is, I think, one storyline where we actually see her delivering mail. I think it's referenced a few times. I will say she's not used a whole. I think she's given one, she's given that one storyline basically to herself.
Right.
But for the most part, she's basically just there to facilitate the kids.
Which, for what should be an educational show, as well as just entertainment, which is, just think of what they could have done with her character, and what Ghostwriter could have done with reading the mail, and hey, here's an important clue.
Yeah.
They could have done so much more with it. But
I will say, in this show, no adults, at least as adults, are ever revealed to be able to see Ghostwriter. Although in the credits, they do make it seem like Grandma saw something.
Yes, they did. Yeah. Or it had changed back by the time she looked, and she knew something happened.
She was like,
she wasn't sure.
That? Yeah.
Yeah. Like that they could have, played around with that some. But anyway, I think she was a lovely performance.
Sure.
And I really enjoyed her.
Yeah. For mine, I thought momentarily about giving it to Captain Lou Albano, simply because it's Captain Lou Albano.
Absolutely.
And he was 100% being Captain Lou Albano. You're going to put me on your show, right?
Yep.
But mine actually came out to a tie between Lenny and Grandma for that wonderful dress down of Jamal. It was just the best. I'm just and that is also my my rewind moment, because that I literally rewound that moment in the episode to watch that again. I was like, hold on a second. Did they just do that to him like that? That is great. As part of my rewind moments in the last story, I forgot to mention this, and I just think it's so good because, to be honest, it was one of the best bits of writing in the whole episode. But there is a scene where they are in Alex and Gabby's parents own a bodega, and there's a scene where Alex is actually stacking some items, and they close up on a cereal box, and the cereal box says Jolly Jack's Pirate Munch.
Jolly Jack's Pirate Munch.
I gotta say, sounds a little dirty, but best writing in the series so far, in my opinion. Definitely the best bit of naming, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah. What was your rewind moment? Your moment in the episode that was either the best or the weirdest, or just made you go, "What?"
The main one was just the whole thing about the FBI. I had to, after I finished the entire 4 episodes, I went back and started with the first one and fast forwarded a bit to where we saw the FBI guy and tried to follow the thread of, okay, who doesn't know about the FBI? And it was Ghostwriter.
Yeah.
Ghostwriter said who is FBI or what is FBI.
Well, and then
So-
Jamal was like, I don't know. Or did he say they're police or something?
Well, he never responded to that.
Oh,
He
okay.
responded to what is
That's right.
a copyright infringement. I don't know. And then they cleared that screen, and then we got another warning, and it just said FBI.
Yeah.
What is FBI? And he never responded to that. So that's why I was like trying to figure out like who doesn't know the FBI. Kids know what the FBI is.
I was about to say, at that age, I knew what the FBI was. I mean, I couldn't
Yeah,
give
I knew
you
what
like
the
a
FBI was.
detailed description. I mean, I might not have known that they were in Washington, but I would have known basically what they were.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was just trying to follow that thread of why do people keep getting confused about the FBI?
Yeah.
Until all the way to the library scene where Jamal and Alex are looking it up, and Alex says, "Oh, the FBI is in Washington D.C." And I'm like, you know what? I don't care anymore. The whole point was just so that the girls then, Tina and Gabby, could make the association after doing all of the legwork.
Yeah.
And putting these things together, that the FBI guy could not be a suspect because he was on a flight back to Washington, D.C., because that's where the FBI headquarters is at 6:30. So there's no way he could have done it. I was like, at the same time, I'm like, but he wouldn't have just flown in from D.C. to visit this one store and then immediately flown back to D.C. just to serve a summons.
Yeah, honestly, they would have had somebody else do that, or they would have mailed it to him.
Well, it would have been an agent working out of the New York office.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's New York. Duh.
Because that was another thing I didn't realize until like the third episode is that this takes place in New York.
Yeah, everything's there.
Because they never mention it.
No.
They never mention where they are once until the third episode.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely episodes where it's much more part of it, but yeah, they weren't very explicit. Also, they were filming on worse, like in other episodes, like it looks like New York. This looked like, shittier sets.
Right.
So, I mean, there were externals that it's like, oh, if you've ever been to New York, that kind of looks like New York. But, other places, it wasn't nearly as explicit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Not anyway.
Then my next question is, if Ghostwriter were real and he wrote to you, would you write back, and what would you say?
Oh, wow. Ghostwriter was real. And he wrote to... well, it probably depends on what he wrote to me to begin with. How do you start off that conversation?
Sure.
Oh, gosh. It would probably be twofold. It would probably be, is this grandma?
Okay.
And please tell me you didn't see what I did 30 minutes ago.
All right. Very good. Very good. All right. All right. Well, with that being said, based on what you know,
yes.
Who or what do you think Ghostwriter is?
Well, I mean, like I said, these 4 episodes are all that I have to go on.
Yeah.
And I know that Ghostwriter is not familiar with modern speak as far as 1992 is concerned.
Sure.
So, like gnarly and stuff like that.
Right.
Probably, he doesn't.
He doesn't get
Ghostwriter is not familiar with,
colloquialisms.
he isn't hip with the lingo.
Right.
But also didn't know what FBI was.
Sure.
So there's that. Then Ghostwriter also likes to use like old school sayings, like I can't remember the specific examples from this episode, but he would say something like, "Don't look a gift horse in the mouth," or
Sure.
Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And is obviously an avid reader.
Mm-hmm.
Can't hear very well, if at all.
I mean, I think that's part of the nature of him being a ghost, but yeah.
Exactly. So, despite the fact that this takes place in New York, I'm going to say that Ghostwriter is the ghost of Ben Franklin.
All right, that's an educated guess. I like that.
I mean, I try to put a little bit of thought into it.
Sure.
But I have absolutely nothing else to go on, so that's my best guess.
Okay. The mystery of who Ghostwriter is, it's not covered much in this episode, but it's actually made a big deal of in the eventual pilot that they shot after. And it was planted in that storyline as a mystery that we would be revisiting throughout the series. I will say they don't get back to it as often as they probably should have. There are definitely moments here and there throughout the series where it is touched upon and there are hints given, but the show ended in season 3, actually a very short season, without them revealing who Ghostwriter was. But but there was a writer and producer who eventually gave an interview in 2010 who revealed who Ghostwriter is. Would you like to hear?
Sure.
Okay. So in that interview, Kermit Frazier said that Ghostwriter was the...
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I will say that in the first episode, it's actually revealed that his soul was in a book that was in Jamal's house. And they moved a trunk and it fell open, and that's when his soul was released.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
All right. Well, Zip, thank you for doing this. As interesting as it was. But real quick, I just want to let everyone know, if you want to get in touch with us, you can always contact us. The podcast is at The Flying Cow Pod on everything. The Flying Cow Pod at gmail.com. At The Flying Cow Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And then you can always find us on Facebook as well. Zip, I would like to give you the opportunity if there's anything you would like to plug. Also, if there's anything you're enjoying, feel free to share whatever you'd like. But if there's anything you know of that is lifting up the voices of women or people of color, that is also encouraged.
As we mentioned earlier, Adina, myself, and our friend Jack have a podcast called It Came From the Bottom, where we are going through the bottom 100 list of movies as voted by the users of IMDb. We have made it halfway through the list.
Woohoo!
Actually, just past halfway. Yeah. We've had a few episodes come out recently where we've picked back up the trail. So if you want to check that out, we're on iTunes and other podcast services. I'm sure we have a Twitter account, but Lord knows when the last time we used it was.
Right. So was there anything else that you wanted to plug or anything else that you wanted to...
Nah, not really.
Okay. Well, my only thing is something that, honestly, I'm really surprised and a little disappointed isn't out there a little bit more, especially in, the current climate. The plays of August Wilson. August Wilson is one of my favorite playwrights. I think the first show of his I ever read was Fences. The first show of his I ever saw was Joe Turner's Come and Gone. I saw a live production in London starring Delroy Lindo.
Oh, wow.
That was so good. Honestly, to
I
this
bet.
day, one of my favorite live theater experiences.
Mhm.
But, you know, his shows are just, you know, I mean, you know Zip, but, you know, he wrote the Pittsburgh Cycle, which is basically a series of 10 plays, all from a different point in time, from a different decade throughout the 1900s.
Yeah.
Right. Throughout the 1900s, all from the perspective of basically black people during that time.
Right.
And I just love it because the shows are just they're honest, and they're unfortunately a perspective that for the longest time we haven't gotten at least in a very public way.
Right.
And I love seeing these. I haven't unfortunately read a lot of his stuff, but everything that I have is just great. So if you have never read August Wilson, seek him out. Some of his stuff has been turned into movies. Fences, like I said, I believe The Piano Lesson, and there are a couple of others which I can't remember off the top of my head. But I've never seen at least a bad production of his. I mean, you know,
Right.
I've also seen the most popular ones, but it's good stuff in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that is about it. So, Zip, like I said before, thank you so much for coming on the episode.
Indeed.
I know part of it was a little painful, but hopefully you got at least a little bit of enjoyment out of it.
I did. Oh, well, I mean, you know, nothing beats an unexpected appearance from Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, come on.
Right? Absolutely.
I mean, because I actually had to stop the episode and be like, "Is that Sam Jackson?"
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know.
I will say, and
But yeah,
go ahead.
I think the positives definitely outweighed the negatives. It wasn't entirely horrible.
Well, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, join us next time when we are going to be talking about a story arc that includes Alex running for class president and the return of Calvin Ferguson. That's right. The 12-year-old everyone wants to punch. But I gotta take us out with one last thing, and I am so sorry to do this to you, Zip. But hold on.
Oh, it's not the song, is it?
You gotta remember that friends are forever.
Friends are forever. Let's show what we can do. See a friend in trouble and help him make it through. Friends are forever. We're choosing right and
That's
wrong.
right. Goodbye, everybody.
We've got friends